Thank you. I want to welcome everyone here to South San Francisco today. My name is Mike Massoni. I'm the police chief in South San Francisco. Today we're going to be announcing the rollout of the Human Trafficking Protocol developed in San Mateo County. And the first speaker I'd like to introduce is Congresswoman Jackie Speier. Congresswoman.
I must say that I have never felt safer than I do right now. And I hope that we still have police officers on the beats in our communities. But I'm really thrilled to be here with all of our law enforcement and also with all of the cities of San Mateo County that are represented here by mayors and city councilmen, and a special thank you to the members of the City Council of South San Francisco for donating their space here this afternoon. So I'm also incredibly thankful to Mike Massoni and the police chiefs of San Mateo County for creating this opportunity today, because it was through extraordinary efforts by all of them that we are standing here today with the rollout of this protocol. Let me start off by telling you a little bit of how I came to this issue. About 3 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, I saw a half-page ad that had been published in both the San Francisco Chronicle and the Washington Post. It was an open letter to Craig Newmark, who is the founder of Craigslist, by 2 sex-trafficked survivors who pleaded with him to close down the adult services page of Craigslist. They called themselves AK and MC. AK wrote, and I quote, "I was sold for sex by the hour at truck stops and cheap motels, 10 hours with 10 different men every night." MC, who was forced into prostitution at the age of 11, wrote that her pimp, quote, "made $1,500 a night selling my body, dragging me to Los Angeles, Houston, Little Rock, and one trip to Las Vegas in the trunk of a car." I couldn't believe what I was reading. And then I started researching the issue and was as shocked as I'm sure everyone is when they find out that anywhere between 100,000 and 300,000 youngsters, truly youngsters in our communities across this country, are sex trafficked every single year. I then met with a young woman in Washington, D.C. who had just escaped her pimp. She was living in a safe house. She sat on a big leather couch in my office, a little afraid, but over the course of 20 minutes, we talked about what her life had been like and how she had been lured into this life of sex trafficking. And it happened so innocently. It started when she was walking from her grandmother's house to her sister's house alone, but just walking in the middle of the day, and this young man drives up in a car and says, "Hey, Tiffany." She says, "My name's not Tiffany." "Hey, Tiffany." But then engaged her enough to where he said, "Well, how about if I buy you a hamburger at McDonald's?" And it started with a hamburger at McDonald's. And then they were, quote, dating. And before long, they were together, and he was saying, "Well, we really need to make a living here." And that's how she became enslaved. And I said to her, "How many times a day were you forced to have sex?" And she told me as many as 14 times a day. And I must tell you, I shivered at the thought that that was going on to her or to any young person in this country. So at that point, I decided that we had to do something about it. And so I convened the first meeting with local law enforcement here in San Mateo County. We included representatives from so many others that are knowledgeable on the issue, including the U.S. Attorney and the FBI. And we then became really very educated about what the issue was like. I then also met with the new CEO of Craigslist, along with the FBI and the U.S. Attorney. And over the course of probably 6 months, not just by our efforts, but by the efforts of many other groups, Craigslist decided to take down their adult services section. Now, not that we should get a lot of solitude in knowing that that happened, because what happened was it just gravitated to other websites, and you'll be hearing a little bit about that in a few moments. So we then recognized that there was really still much more that needed to be done. And the truth is, one of the biggest problems was the fact that when you get a young person who has been trafficked, where do you take them? Do you take them to juvenile hall? And that's when we became aware of the great work of Freedom House and others like them, NGOs that are providing those kind of services, but there's not nearly enough. And the federal funding for creation of these programs is de minimis. We pride ourselves in a bipartisan effort as part of a focus on sex trafficking by creating funding for 6 of these facilities nationwide. I mean, truly a drop in the bucket. So then the work began with Chief Massoni and the other chiefs throughout the county to create a protocol. And it was done in collaboration with local, state, and federal law enforcement, the DA and U.S. Attorney. And the result has been, I think, something that we can all be very proud of. As a result of all of the research and study and training that took place, we saw right here in South San Francisco where it was paying off to have that training by the actual rescuing of a number of trafficked young girls and the prosecution of 2 of these pimps, who are now each spending about 9 years in prison as a result of their activities. We also provided training to local airport flight attendants and airport personnel through an organization called the Airline Ambassadors. We then, with the help of South San Francisco and their training program, have done trainings for the hotels in both South San Francisco and Burlingame, with others to come online as well. So a comprehensive effort is underway in San Mateo County, for which I can not say enough about the extraordinary leadership that has been shown by law enforcement on this issue. Why does it happen? It happens because traffickers find out that they can make a lot of money by trafficking young people. In fact, they easily make over $600,000 a year. And the great thing from their perspective is, with a young person, they can traffic them over and over again. When you sell drugs, you can only sell it once. So much of the drug trafficking that goes on has shifted in some respects to the trafficking of young people for sex, because it's so lucrative and you can use them over and over again. Our region is particularly susceptible to this because we've got the airport in this jurisdiction, we have hotels in this district, and because we are in a region where conventions and conferences take place and it's an attractive destination, people find a way to traffic here, bring these girls and young boys here for the specific purpose of using them to sell sex. So today we're sending a very strong message. This county is not a place that welcomes sex traffickers. In fact, it is going to be the most inhospitable place to come if you are sex trafficking. This is an extraordinary effort. I'm very proud of everyone who's standing with me up here, because without them, this would not have taken place. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think she is underestimating her value in this program. She is definitely the driving force in pushing us to get this moving, but it didn't take a real hard push, because we all realized how important this issue is. I'm going to talk briefly about what the trafficking protocol in San Mateo County will entail. And for the members of the media, we do have an executive summary of that for your perusal. If you'd like to get that, one of my captains here will be able to hand that out after the press conference is over. So essentially what the human trafficking protocol does, it establishes guidelines for uniformed officers and law enforcement officers on how to handle these types of cases when they come across them. It's a blueprint for them to follow so they know exactly what steps need to be taken. It also takes into consideration the housing for some of these victims, because we don't want to treat them like suspects. We want to treat them like victims, like they are. It talks about the collaboration with the local, state, and federal partners. You're going to hear from the district attorney's office today. You're also going to hear from some of our federal partners on how they're going to work with us on combating these things. In San Mateo County, we have started a program where operationally members of San Mateo County law enforcement will work together as a team from different cities, and we'll focus on certain cities within the county, and we will proactively go out and look to locate, identify, and rescue these victims of human trafficking. And that's all the men and women standing behind me in uniform working together as a group. Again, our federal partners are assisting us with this, along with the NGOs like Freedom House, to provide shelter for these victims of this heinous crime. The protocol also tells a 911 dispatcher what to do should they get a call from somebody who identifies himself as a trafficking victim. It deals with how to deal with child victims. There's a whole special way that you have to deal with children who are victims of this crime, and it gives them a guideline and things to follow and how to follow along with these kind of things. The victim assistance is one of the most important things, because we want the victims to be part of the whole process. We need the victims to get successful prosecution of these guys who are exploiting them. And as the Congresswoman stated, training. You can't underestimate the amount of training. We've had several cases in South San Francisco where, as a result of the training provided by my staff, that the hotel management and staff were able to recognize something that they thought was a little bit weird. So they picked up the phone and called us, and we were able to identify and rescue numerous victims of this. So as I said, we have several speakers today, so I'd like to keep my remarks short. So the first speaker we'll have is Al Serrato from the San Mateo County District Attorney's Office.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the District Attorney's Office, I would like to thank Congresswoman Speier for setting this process in motion and for directing attention on a problem that, though hidden from public view, is certainly a serious plague upon not just our community, but communities throughout the state. Modern day slavery, it's not hyperbole to realize the impact, that the dehumanizing impact that this crime has both on the victims and on society generally. Today marks the culmination of an ongoing collaborative process. Under the leadership of Chief Massoni, agencies countywide collaborated in the development of this protocol, which will guide officers in the field from the moment of first contact with both victims and with offenders. The guidelines provided in the protocol will enhance the ability of my office to fully prosecute these violations. The South San Francisco Police Department has been a leader in this effort, and my office will continue to commit our full resources to do our part. We're working closely with the investigating police departments in developing these cases and making them as strongly provable as possible. In fact, to better prepare, prosecutors from my office have accompanied the task force agents that were referred to on these sting operations so that we can observe firsthand the dynamics at play that make these cases so challenging. We're continuing to take advantage of training opportunities and are developing relationships with surrounding counties to take advantage of their experience in dealing with these cases. Our mission is not simply to hold offenders accountable. While taking advantage of the changes in sentencing laws to punish pimps and traffickers is a primary goal, we remain mindful of the need to be as victim-centered and focused as we can. Because victims are often distrustful and often arrive here from distant locations, we cannot simply file cases and forget about them until the next court date. All too often, the victims of these crimes will return to their traffickers or will move on and be not locatable. All too often, a case that was strong at the time of arrest becomes difficult to bring to closure because we cannot find the victim. To meet these challenges, we assign these cases to a vertical prosecution unit, meaning that one prosecutor is responsible for handling the case from initial filing through sentencing. Though resource intensive, this maximizes our ability to maintain the cooperation of the victim and to deal with any problems that arise. In addition, we have made use of our victim services specialists and inspectors at an early stage. We have explored options for transitional housing and other support services, and we have, where possible, provided temporary housing and other financial assistance to provide a safety net for these victims. This is beginning to bear fruit. We are presently prosecuting a 3-defendant case involving 5 victims who have received housing assistance so that they can break away from the traffickers who once dominated them. With the adoption of this protocol, we take the next step forward in concentrating our efforts and in bringing the full resources of law enforcement to bear on this intractable problem. Thank you.
Thank you all. Our next speaker will be Brian Stretch from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
We cannot eradicate human trafficking without the public's help. We all need to recognize human trafficking in our midst, identify and rescue the victims, and bring the perpetrators to justice. We need the public's help. If you see something, say something. For that's the access that law enforcement has to know if and when and where human trafficking is occurring in our midst. Not one more person should suffer as a victim of human trafficking in this day and age in this community. On behalf of the United States Attorney's Office, we would very much like to thank the Congresswoman for her relentless leadership on this issue. She has been the catalyst for the Zero Tolerance Initiative here in the County of San Mateo, and today's protocol is an outgrowth of that initiative, and it aligns perfectly with the federal priorities and the federal resources, which focuses on a victim-oriented approach to solving this issue. We would also like to thank District Attorney Steve Wagstaff and his office for their tremendous work and relentless pursuit of perpetrators of these crimes. They are a model district attorney for other counties to emulate. All the chiefs of police here in the County of San Mateo work together and benefit from the talents and the insights of South San Francisco Police and Fire Chief Mike Massoni. He tirelessly pursues human trafficking and will not rest until every victim of human trafficking in this county is liberated. We're also fortunate today to be joined by our federal law enforcement partners in this effort, the FBI and Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. They are the leaders of the federal effort with respect to human trafficking and are steeped with great expertise in this area. They work collaboratively with the local, the state law enforcement. They work with elected officials, the NGOs, as we heard about, Freedom House as an example, in an effort to bring a collective solution to this issue. And it's only through this collaborative effort that we're able to prosecute the perpetrators of these crimes, but more importantly, assist the victims of these crimes. The Congresswoman referred to a case that our office prosecuted not too long ago, which resulted in the sentences of 9 years for 2 individuals. It was a husband and wife team. And unfortunately, the story is not that uncommon. They lured and targeted teenagers with the promise of money, with the promise of drugs, and the promise of a family-styled environment. And then they kept control of them with drugs, force, the threat of force, and creating what can only be described as a climate of fear. It's the result of that collaboration between the FBI, HSI, the District Attorney's Office, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the South San Francisco Police Department that, working together, was able to achieve the result of a 9-year sentence for these perpetrators. So with that, we offer our congratulations to the Congresswoman and everybody here in the County of San Mateo for creating what we expect to be a blueprint protocol to be adopted and implemented in other counties.
Thank you, Kevin. Our next speaker will be, I'm sorry, thank you, Brian. Our next speaker will be Kevin Sherborne from the Federal Bureau of Investigations.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to commend the Chief, the rest of the police chiefs, and the cities and the County of San Mateo for breaking ground with this blueprint protocol, as Brian Stretch alluded to. Human trafficking is a cancer on society. It is often associated with other violent criminal activity, including gang activity and the illegal drug trade. I'd like to take the opportunity to say that we look forward to continuing to work with the local law enforcement officers and with state law enforcement and our federal partners as well. So we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Next speaker will be Tatum King from Homeland Security Investigations.
All right, thanks to Congresswoman Jackie Speier, Police Chief Michael Massoni, for the opportunity to participate in the announcement of the San Mateo County's Human Trafficking Protocol to address this heinous form of modern-day slavery, as mentioned earlier by Mr. Stretch. I'm representing Homeland Security Investigations today. It's an investigative agency at the Department of Homeland Security. And one of our primary focuses is human trafficking cases, most especially the cases that have an international nexus, either the violator, perpetrators, criminal organizations, or the victims, most especially the victims. The key to these cases is exactly what is reflected here today: partnerships with local, state, federal, FBI, U.S. Attorney's Office, foreign authorities, as well as Department of Labor, state attorney's offices, NGOs, and also consulates. HSI is a resource to you and can continue to assist you with facilitation of benefits for non-U.S. citizen victims, including special types of visas, including T visas, U visas, and also continued presence. And our commitment is not to deport the victims. Much like our partner law enforcement agencies here today, we have a victim-centered approach to investigating these cases and maintain a victim witness coordinator to assist victims and work with our NGO partners to provide much-needed services to the victims. Finally, I'd like you to be aware of the Department of Homeland Security campaign, and this is our campaign throughout the Department of Homeland Security to focus on human trafficking. We have outreach materials that are available online at www.dhs.gov. I also have my colleague here today to share some of our trafficking indicator cards. And these are available in many, many different languages, passed out to our law enforcement partners, our NGO partners, our consulates, so that way they're aware of some key indicators that will help them identify victims so we can get them support and bring the violators to justice as soon as possible. So thanks again for your time today. Congratulations, Chief Massoni, the San Mateo Chiefs Association. Thank you very much, and Congresswoman Speier. Thank you.
We've heard a lot about the law enforcement aspect of it. Now we're going to hear from one of our NGOs, one of our partners in this, Jada M. from Freedom House.
Thank you so much. I'd like to really thank Congresswoman Jackie Speier and Chief Mike Massoni and all of the abolitionists here today to represent the victims that we take care of on a day-to-day basis through initiatives such as Zero Tolerance, the Protocol for Law Enforcement, and the Blue Ribbon Commission, Anti-Human Trafficking Subcommittee led by Judge Lee. We now view human trafficking and those who have survived it in a different light than we did just a few years ago. It wasn't uncommon to find women involved in prostitution rings treated as criminals instead of victims. It wasn't clearly understood that many women and children usually find themselves in these activities after years of being neglected and abused. Sometimes their own family members force them into the life to raise money. Their exploiters beat them, enslave them, drug dependent, and even threaten harm to their loved ones. Through extensive trainings for law enforcement personnel from top administrators right down to street level officers, a new understanding has been brought to bear on these victims, what they have gone through. The protocol also recognizes the need for collaboration with victim advocate organizations. Collaboration is essential for the success of these survivors, providing a multidisciplinary team approach, a continuum of care, and taking a victim-centered approach. At Freedom House, we support survivors day in and day out, 24/7. Our trauma-informed case management team is now routinely offered the opportunity to accompany law enforcement on operations. I was moved to start Freedom House in 2009 when I realized that the life patterns of these women and children lasted years, and that truly rescuing them meant not only removing them from their circumstances, but giving them the time, safe space needed to recover from their severe physical and psychological trauma, with the goal of becoming self-sufficient, independent women. There was no shelter of that kind in Northern California, let alone in San Mateo County. With much effort and work, my husband and I opened the first long-term dedicated to serving the human trafficking survivors called the Monarch in 2010. At Monarch, a San Mateo County-based home, women are rescued from not only sex trafficking, but also from forced labor and involuntary servitude. And they could stay up to 18 months longer if necessary. And this is really a critical component for them to be able to recover from their trauma they have endured. It is really important to meet them where they are when they first arrive. Typically, they come nothing more than with their clothing on their backs. But really, it's time for them to rest and recover. Each of them need a lot of care and support. And it's meeting from their immediate needs of food, clothing, transportation, but lots of unconditional love to help rebuild trust that they lost and to restore their self-dignity. After time of rest and professional counseling, the staff and volunteers help to work on their goals, develop life skills, cultivate an environment to pursue education and vocation to empower them to become independent and safely help them reintegrate into our community. We've also partnered with many other community service organizations such as mental, legal, psychological, and social services. We've been fortunate also for the community members who have engaged in pro bono services, even as much as cosmetic surgeons who requires removing of their branding, their tattoos by their traffickers, dentists, ophthalmologists, orthodontists. These are all critical support that these survivors are needing. This year, Freedom House opened the second home, The Nest, and it's for adolescents ages 12 to 17 years of young ages in the San Francisco Bay Area. The Nest offers homeschool, trauma-informed counseling, case management, recreational activities designed to allow these young survivors to have a childhood back that was stolen from them and to empower them to become independent, empowered young adults. I still vividly remember the very first survivor call I received at Freedom House. And this was just 2 minutes down the street, the hospital, Kaiser. It came from an emergency doctor right there in South San Francisco about a young lady who needed to be rescued from her trafficker. Her abuse started at home at age 5 when she was sexually assaulted by her own father. She later went from one foster home to another where she was repeatedly abused at there as well, and finally ending up on the streets where she was romanced by a man who said he wanted to marry her. He was 30 years older than she was. But his real intentions soon became clear. He coerced her to having sex with his multiple clients every night, 10 to 15 times every night. And eventually, she resisted. And after being badly beaten, she finally ran to the hospital. I was heartbroken when I saw what had been done to these young women, but so thankful that we had a safe home to bring her to Freedom House. It's been an amazing journey for me through Freedom House. We have ups and downs, but I'm humbled by many of our survivors for their willingness to heal, strain to get better, and strive to new life. It's been a privilege to witness many lives being restored, transformed, and graduate out of Freedom House. So at Freedom House, we know that physical rescue is just one first step on a long road to recovery. And while this plague of modern-day slavery is staggering, I have hope as we unite together as a community, working collaboratively, implementing victim-centered approach, protocols, demanding zero tolerance for this heinous crime of modern-day slavery, providing supportive, long-term aftercare, and speaking up for the voiceless victims. We will win the battle. So thank you.
Well, on behalf of the San Mateo County Police Chiefs and Sheriff's Association, I want to thank everyone for being here today. I want to thank my partners in the San Mateo County Law Enforcement for stepping up and taking on this task. A message to the traffickers: if you come to San Mateo County, you will have the full weight of the local, state, and federal partners coming down on you, and coming down on you hard. I want to thank everybody again, please to the members of the community out there. If you see something that's a little bit weird, if you think something may be happening, please call your local law enforcement and let us take care of it. Thank you very much. We'll have some time for some questions from anyone.
How is this different from what other counties do with regards to human trafficking?
First of all, many counties haven't really addressed this question. You look to Alameda County, they have a very fine facility and program and commitment, as does San Jose area. But if you look across the country, there really is not the kind of attention or focus that's been placed on trying to rid the region of sex trafficking as there is here.
Most of the counties in the Bay Area do have some protocols in place. Our protocol mirrors that, and I think ours enhances it a little bit because we do get more of the NGOs involved than the other protocols do. So we do take more of a victim-centered approach, but you're not going to do this in the 9 Bay Area counties. We will take care of it.
What do you expect, how will you measure the success of the blueprint?
Well, I'll measure the success by seeing an increase in the number of prosecutions, both apprehension and prosecutions. The fact that we have Freedom House in this county is really a remarkable advantage that can't be said about programs in many areas across the country. So it's very important to have something that's comprehensive, that's going to take the victim from the site of the gross violation into an environment of healing and then growth.
Will there be any increase in funding for those NGOs and or victim services?
You know, I'd like to have Heidi come back here and explain how she gets her funding, because it's pretty remarkable what she's done, because I think that she's had very limited government funding.
Yes, in fact, currently we don't have any government funding yet. I'm hopeful that we will get some with more medias and support, but currently it is mostly privately funded through individuals, getting on my knees, through family members, and now we're fortunate to have a lot of congregation members partnering with us, as well as corporations and foundation on some grants. Yes.
How many people can you help, and how many people would you like to be able to help?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, if we could have the funds right now, the resources, we could open a dozen homes at this point. There is a huge need, and the fact that, you know, right now we are a transitional housing, which is very critical, but also we would love to see an emergency shelter so that we could do a better assessment when we bring them on. But the needs are huge in that, you know, we need to continue to grow. I mean, one day I'm hopeful that we can eradicate this heinous crime, but there are so many victims that need that extensive support. So we do really need continual resources, not only the funding, but also a lot of volunteers as well as professionals who could provide that, and so that we could do this as a community. It really takes a village to take care of a child. And what we do is we also not only help in-house residents, we also reach out to non-residential programs. So if we get a call and we can't house them or it doesn't fit our program, we do a lot of support, give them resources and programs that is essential for them to become independent. So we have 8 beds right now, and then for minors are 6 beds, but we could house them, you know, only 6 and 8 at a time, so which is really not a lot, but again, we do extend our services out to non-residential survivors.
I think it's very important to point out that oftentimes these victims are duped, particularly if they come from other countries where they're being told they're coming to the United States for a job, and they're very excited about the opportunity for a job, and then they get here and the job is being a prostitute. So that, coupled with the fact that the population tends to be runaways and foster care youth. So that's the profile of those who are sex trafficked underage. And there is they're high value targets, because the Johns will pay more for the young girls or boys than they will for an older person.
One issue that needs to be addressed also is, we talked a lot about the sex trade, but there's also indentured servitude, where people are brought to this country with the promise of working for me, and then they are held slaves in homes to be their maids or nannies or their servants. So that's just as critical that we address that also, but it's not as easy because that's happening inside a home. But that's the kind of thing that a neighbor may see something, a friend may see something that just doesn't look right. And as I stressed before, give us a call, let us take a look at it and see what's going on. Again, thanks everyone, and again, thank all you guys.